Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a truly profound concept, how biblical interpretations of the book of Genesis literally dictate the design of earthly architecture. I know, it sounds massive, right? But we're going to break it all down together. We'll be using the source lectures of theologian James B. Jordan, whose fascinating analysis connects the very creation of the universe to the actual physical ways we build our own structures. I want you to just think for a second about your own local worship spaces, or maybe a grand cathedral you visited at some point. Why exactly do they look the way they do? Have you ever wondered why the geometry is so specific, or why the lighting comes from a certain angle, or why the whole layout just feels so structured? Well, according to the source text, these architectural choices aren't just arbitrary, and they're definitely not just aesthetic. They are deeply, deeply rooted in ancient theology. Okay, let's dive into this. Today's explainer covers 5 main areas: heavenly patterns on earth, the rhythm of creation, geometric world building, the garden and the field, and finally, architecture as maturation. Starting with Section 1, heavenly patterns on earth, as above, so below. To really grasp this, we have to contrast how heaven and earth were actually created. According to Genesis, heaven was created perfectly complete from day one. Angels were made all at once as a fully mature host. They don't start as babies and grow up. Earth, on the other hand, totally different. It was deliberately created dark, shapeless, and empty. God intentionally left it unformed so that humanity, starting as babies and growing over time, could actively participate in the process of forming and filling it. So the crucial point here is that human beings are meant to pull patterns down from heaven to organize the chaotic earth. The biblical text repeatedly shows prophets receiving highly specific heavenly architectural blueprints to literally impose onto our physical world. I mean, think about it. Moses went up a mountain and was shown a heavenly pattern for the tabernacle. David was shown a pattern for Solomon's temple. Ezekiel saw a blueprint for the post-exile temple. And in Revelation, John is shown the New Jerusalem, which is described as a massive heavenly pyramid of glass and gold coming down to lay itself over an earthly mountain. Heaven is quite literally the architectural model for the earth. Moving right along to Section 2, the rhythm of creation, the chiasm of Genesis 1. To really understand Genesis 1, we need to know a literary term called a chiasm. A chiasm is basically a structure where concepts are mirrored or repeated in a reverse symmetrical order. It tells us that God is very much a God of ritual. The creation week wasn't just random magic, it's a very specific ritualistic waltz, and God is methodically laying out every single step. Notice how the narrative moves sequentially. Day 1 is light. Day 2 is forming a firmament. Day 3 is filling the earth with plants. And then the pattern pivots. Day 4 brings light bearers. Day 5 fills the oceans and skies. Day 6 forms animals and man. And day 7 is the light of the Sabbath. Light, form, fill. Light, fill, form. Light. The universe was built on this highly structured, beautifully rhythmic ritual. But here is where it gets incredibly relatable for us. The sources point out that this ancient rhythm of evening and morning, dictated in Genesis, maps perfectly onto our own daily biological cycle. Every evening, our energy depletes. Nighttime brings deep sleep, which the biblical authors actually equate to a temporary death. Then morning brings waking up with brand new energy, like a mini resurrection. Why do we operate on the exact same 24-hour cycle as the planet? Because we are made of the earth, and each day we are called to build and mature our world just a little bit further beyond yesterday's work. All right, Section 3. Geometric world building, imposing order on chaos. I absolutely love this quirky yet profound quote from the source material. You are a dirt clod energized by the Holy Spirit. According to Genesis, man was formed from the dust of the ground and breathed into by the Spirit of life. So you are literally made of the earth, but you're a piece of the world energized by God's Spirit to consciously transform the rest of the world around you. Have you ever noticed the stark visual contrast between raw nature and human creation? Untamed nature just doesn't naturally do straight lines. It's characterized by organic, paisley shapes, spirals, Fibonacci sequences, and those winding animal paths that sort of just meander toward water. But when humans build, especially when they build holy architecture based on those heavenly blueprints we talked about, they impose rigid geometry, perfect squares, perfect rectangles, perfect circles, and straight lines. Take the tabernacle as our prime example. It was designed entirely with shapes you won't find organically in nature, specifically to act as a portable architectural model of the cosmos, the Holy of Holies, a perfect geometric cube representing the highest heavens. The holy place was two perfect squares, representing the firmament and the stars. Even the outer altar was square, acting as a portable holy mountain. By building with this strict geometry, humanity acts as an image of God, literally imposing heavenly order onto the chaotic earth. Which brings us to section 4, the garden and the field, pears versus donuts. The source material points out a really vital geographic distinction in Genesis. The Garden of Eden represents childhood. It's a sanctuary of simple law. Don't eat from that one tree. And the food there is totally free and easy. If you're hungry, you just reach out and pick a pear. But the field, the land outside the garden, that represents adulthood. That's the outside world of wisdom, where getting food requires hard work, technology, and learning. God's goal was always for humans to grow up in the garden and eventually move out into the field. To really illustrate this, the speaker uses this fantastic, kind of sticky analogy about donuts. A baby in the garden can easily just pick a pear. But what if you want a donut? Well, there are no donut trees. To make a donut, you must possess immense, mature wisdom. Think about it. You have to learn how to grow and harvest grain. You have to learn to sift and grind it into flour. You have to figure out how to extract oil and make sugar. You literally must learn how to safely make and manipulate fire. And finally, you combine it all to fry the dough. Moving from the simple pear to the complex donut is the exact journey from simple childhood laws to complex, mature wisdom. And this leads to a pretty surprising insight from the text. The serpent was actually from the field. It was the wisest of all the beasts. According to this framework, the serpent was originally sent into the garden as an agent of wisdom instruction. Its job was to prompt Eve to think critically about God's commands, to teach her the fear of God, which the Bible calls the very beginning of wisdom. Now, of course, the tragedy is that the serpent went rogue and contradicted God, but its initial presence was genuinely meant to be a catalyst for their maturation. And finally, section 5, architecture as maturation, growing from the living room to the cathedral. Just think about the pure practical reality of group sizes here. If you have a small gathering of, say, 15 people in a living room, the space is informal, flexible, and spontaneous. You just stand up from the sofa and start talking. But if you have a massive congregation of 800 people in a hall, the sheer number of people naturally forces a space to develop formal architecture. You need organized seating, dignified ways to process in and out, and highly structured rituals. The gathering matures, and so the architecture absolutely must mature with it. So just like individuals physically mature, our spaces actually have to formalize too. When a baby's born, it's smooth, kind of squishy, and somewhat undefined. But as we age, we gain wrinkles, which are literally lines of definition formed by our life experiences. In biblical terms, aging brings the glory of white hair, which is a sign of respected eldership. Early creation and early gatherings are exactly like that smooth baby, but over time they must grow into highly defined, glorious, and beautifully structured architecture. Ultimately, a fully mature worship space is designed to communicate 4 absolute pillars of biblical history. It must teach law, providing simple obedience and the fear of God. It must teach wisdom, maturing the congregation to handle the complex donuts of the outside world. It must teach judgments, so we understand the historical consequences of our actions. And it must teach promises, always looking forward to future redemption. A fully matured architectural space actively facilitates every single one of these elements of learning. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to wrap up our explainer today. Because you are a dirt clod energized by the Spirit, you are a world builder. So, what kind of worlds are you building around yourself? Whether it's the geometry of your office, the habits in your home, or the architecture of your sacred spaces, how are you bringing order, light, and maturity to your environment? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep building, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.